I'm Greg Tepper. That's Greg Powers. And this is This Week
in Cruden.
This Week in Recruiting. With Greg Powers of Next Level Athlete. Follow him on Twitter at GPowerScout. Follow Next Level Athlete on Twitter at NextLevelD1. Powers, a lot to get to in the recruiting world. Let's start with our prospect on the rise. And I believe our friend Adam Bodecker was at this game.
Wow.
For Justin Northwest. When their wide receiver, Zavion Taylor, went berserker. 5'9", 165 pounds, 2020 wide receiver. He's had some offers. He's had some looks from a lot of FCS teams, D2 teams, things like that. When you catch 12 passes for 309 yards and 6 touchdowns, I wonder if his phone's going to light up a little bit more. Zavion Taylor, certainly a prospect on the rise.
Have yourself a game, Zavion Taylor.
Zavion Taylor. Is that Xavier? Zavion Taylor.
Zavion Taylor. Have yourself a game. It was a great game, 309 yards, 60 Ds. You mentioned it. He came to our Next Level Athlete camp back in January, and he wasn't on a whole lot of radars at that time. And what I really liked about him and noticed right off the bat is that he runs really good routes, and he's listed at 5'9", 165, but he's much longer than that. He has a good catch radius for a kid who's only 5'9", and I think he's perfectly suited to play in that slot role in an offense at college, and I think you hit the nail right on the head. More doors, I think, will open for him because you're looking at his tape right now, and I can tell you Taylor is more put together right now than he was back in January, so he really worked hard in the offseason to get ready for his senior year, and I think it's going to pay dividends for him as schools continue to look to add pieces to explosive offenses, and he's a guy who can put up numbers, as we witnessed last week.
He is a guy who again, I think the size is probably holding him back right now. He had offers from places like Angelo State, right, and places like East Texas Baptist, Cornell, Furman, places like that. But it sounds like even with just 2 games under his belt, including one big time game, places like Abilene Christian, Rice, UTSA, Stephen F. Austin, starting to turn up the heat a little bit, starting to say, "Hey, what can you do for us?"
And maybe Zavion Taylor or his trainers or position coaches, they may not love to hear this, but when I look at him, he looks like a guy with those long arms and quick hip flip ability. He can probably play corner too. I mean, it's something to think about. I mean, if you can get a great college education and play at a high level and corner, I mean, he looks like a corner. Yeah,
he's got the versatility, and he's certainly, the size is a lot more conducive to corner than receiver, but at the same time, look, the numbers don't lie.
Yeah,
and he's put up numbers. And
I'm not saying that he shouldn't play offense anymore.
Let me just say this. Hi, Greg Tepper, professional football analyst. If he catches 12 passes for 309 yards and 6 touchdowns in every one of his games that he ever plays, he should play receiver.
He'll probably break a record.
I would say that he would be in the mix for records. Let's get to our commit of the week. Our commit of the week, we go up to Denton Ryan. Defensive end Zavion Sanders has made a call. He committed to Texas on Saturday night following his visit to the Texas and LSU game. Surprise, surprise, Denton Ryan's got another stud. Jatavion Sanders is the thing that strikes me is he is a super versatile athlete and a guy that it seems like you could put him anywhere on the field, but at defensive end, he's got a lot of mismatchability, if you will. I'm creating that word.
Yeah, and he really kind of started emerging on the radar early last fall. The first game he played in at Denton Ryan, he made waves at wide receiver and tight end. So when I went to, I believe it was the Mesquite Poteet game, the second week of the season last year, I was like, well, I'm going to go check out this young wide receiver tight end they have. And then I watched Sanders play up front on defense. Mm-hmm. This dude gets after the quarterback. Mm-hmm. And it's one of those positions now that is make or break for a lot of college teams. We saw the pressure that LSU was able to maintain on Sam Ehlinger in that game, and I think that this is a position of need for UT going forward. They need these guys on the edge of the defense who can maintain pressure on the quarterback and make him think every snap somebody's coming after me, and he's that type of dude.
Last year he had 54 tackles, 9.5 sacks, 2 picks, and then he had 23 catches for 378 yards and 5 touchdowns as a wide receiver. Correct me if I'm wrong, no relation to Drew.
No,
there's
no
two
or Spencer.
Or Spencer. There are two. There's a number of Denton's big enough that there's a lot of Sanders families there. But this is no relation to any of those other stars to come out of Denton Ryan. But a guy who is a superstar in Texas is getting a guy. I'm interested to see how they deploy a guy like him. If he's going to stick at defensive end, they're going to need to bulk him up a little bit. At 6'4", 220, but the frame is certainly there to bulk up.
And he could possibly play in that Joseph Osai type of position too. I can't remember exactly what they're calling it, the cowboy backer or something like that. It's probably not the cowboy. It's not the cowboy backer, but that style.
Like the buck or something like
bulldogger.
that. Yeah, bulldog. Yeah, they've always got some sort of, everyone's got their own phrase. Let's see if I can find that Texas depth chart. I'm going to see if they've got they've got it listed on what they call it. They list it as Rover. Or no, BLB. I have no idea what that stands for. Anyway, blindside linebacker? I don't know.
It's the B is a moniker. I just can't remember what it is off the top. I'm sure there'll be a Texas fan that'll tell us on our...
They call it the Buck or something like that.
Buck backer.
The Buck backer. Yeah. Anyway, it's Greg Powers, the next level athlete, joining us on Texas Football Today. Get involved in the conversation, hashtag TF Today. Our recruit of the week is another receiver. Another receiver in the... we'll go to the underclassman of the week first. If you thought that Alvin Shadow Creek was going to go away because they lost their outstanding quarterback, Jamarian George, I have bad news for you. They have a new quarterback. Shadow Creek quarterback Kyron Drones is lighting it up. They're off to a 2-0 start. He's racked up 677 total yards and 10 touchdowns. He is a stud and just a junior.
And this is his junior highlight reel from the first two games that's playing as we talk about his game. And what I really was impressed by is he's a guy who I know can run with the football. But the next two clips, I believe, after this one really shows the type of poise that he has in the pocket. When things start to break down and there's a moment of doubt, he stays in the pocket and still delivers a strike for a touchdown. And I think that's really impressive for a young quarterback who's really starting to earn his stripes at the very high levels of Texas high school football. Shadow Creek is good, and they look good on tape throughout the first 2 weeks of the season. That Summer Creek game really opened my eyes. The score in that one was really lopsided. I didn't think it would be such a blowout, and then they were able to come back and put up 49 points, I believe, in week 2 and shut out an opponent. And I think they played Waltrip maybe in week 2. So not a huge game there, but Drones has been able to rack up 677 yards and scored 10 touchdowns in the first 2 games, and there's a chance we see them again at AT&T Stadium.
This is a guy who I think because so he's only right now he's got an offer from Texas Southern.
Right.
That will not be his only offer.
No.
There's a hot take. And I think that one thing to remember is that because Shadow Creek is such a young program, such a nascent program, right? And this is a guy who did not start for them last year. And basically he got a little bit of mop-up duty, but what can you tell against the twos, right? This is, if you want to talk about the kind of guy who's going to start becoming more of a name,
right?
He checks all those boxes because in a lot of ways, there's no reason for these college programs to know about him yet. Well, now they've got 2 years to get to know him. He's 2-0 as a starter, and he looks really good doing it.
And what's interesting to point out is, Texas has a commitment from Jalen Milroe already at quarterback. Texas A&M has a commitment from Eli Stowers already from Denton Geyer. There's some top-rated quarterbacks that have already emerged on the recruiting landscape, and that's going to open some doors of opportunity up for some schools, possibly from out of state, to come in and get a guy like Kyron Drones or another in-state school who wouldn't have typically been able to pull him in to make a run at him. He really reminds me of LSU quarterbacks of lore. That's really who he reminds me of. It seems like the SEC would be a good fit for him. I'm not saying he's going to get an LSU offer or call it, but to me, looks like a kid who could play at LSU.
Ed Orgeron, call Greg Powers. Finally, let's get to our recruit of the week. Our recruit of the week is Frisco Lone Stars Marvin Mims, another wide receiver in the DFW Metroplex. He is lighting it up early on. 17 catches, 478 yards, 5 touchdowns. The Stanford commit is our number 30 prospect in Dave Campbell's Texas Football's top Hot 100. And he'll get a big test this week as Lone Star looks to become the first team since 1998 to beat Highland Park, from Texas, to beat Highland Park at Highlander Stadium. But he'll have a shot. And if Lone Star is going to pull it off, if Lone Star is going to get to where they want to go, Marvin Mims is a big reason why.
And let's get your take on that game. That's a big game. I mean, where do you stand on that one? Before we talk about Mims.
We could have I think they've got a shot. I don't pick against a streak, and especially when a streak is almost as old as our producer. But I would say that I think they've got a great shot, and I think that this is one of the best teams to ever walk into Highlander Stadium. It would not surprise me if they came out with a win.
It's going to be a good game. I think it's going to be an offensive fireworks after a defensive showdown last year. I can't remember. It was like 17 to
10-7 was the final score on that one.
Yeah. So this year I'm predicting a lot more offensive fireworks. What Mims has been able to do is get open deep down the field. He is a deep ball threat who gets off the line very quick, and quarterback there, Garrett Rangel, who has been stepping in for the injured Chandler Galbin, who's been out throughout the first few weeks of the season, has done a good job of being able to throw him open deep down the field as well. And we weren't able to talk about Mims when he made his commitment to Stanford because there was another recruit that had committed over him that was a little bit more highly rated, so we didn't get to name him committed of the week. So it was nice to be able to circle back and make mention of his commitment to Stanford, and especially for the numbers that he's put up the first 2 weeks of the season, 478 yards and 5 TDs on 17 receptions. He's been doing well.
He's a stud, and he's a big reason why Frisco Lone Star is the number 3 team in Dave Campbell's Texas football in 5A Division I. Finally, it's our This Week in Recruiting Game of the Week, South Grand Prairie and Lancaster. I'm into this. I'm very into this. You want to talk about two programs that are no strangers to putting out blue chippers. This is absolutely loaded. I think we've talked a lot about Lancaster at times, with Lorando Johnson, Magic Rector, but I think that South Grand Prairie is pretty loaded too. That's going to make this, if you're a prospect hound, this is a game that you're going to want to get some eyes on.
I'm counting up. I got 23 prospects.
Jeez,
from Lancaster in the system, which that's pretty good. I'd go out on a limb and think that maybe Lancaster they're up there with Shadow Creek and North Shore with the most prospects right now in Texas high school football for colleges to come by and check out. And South Grand Prairie is one of those teams that's always tough and hard-nosed and has a lot of talent. I really like the young talent that they have in Demekio Nathan and Keelan Robinson at wide receiver. If you're looking for a 2020 prospect that's a bit of a sleeper, then keep an eye on Milton Pfeiffer, who's an outside linebacker safety, the rover position that we kind of talked about earlier. He's that same type of player. And then Lancaster's loaded up. Lorando Johnson, he's committed to LSU. Theron Stroups committed to Baylor, defensive backs, both of those guys. And then on the offensive side of the football, you have Kansas commitment Magic Rector. And then, of course, you have a couple of stud wide receivers in Latrell Caples and Faison Wilson, who's a 2022 prospect to really get to know. He was a DCTF top 25 guy in the magazine this spring.
He is he's stud, and they're absolutely loaded. By the way, I think they just call him the B. That's what they call it. It's just the B, the hybrid backer, the Joseph Asai position. He is Greg Powers of Next Level Athlete. Follow him on Twitter at GPowersScout. Follow Next Level Athlete on Twitter at NextLevelD1. Powers, appreciate your time. Let's do it again next week.
Let's do it.